Hey, what's up, you guys? It's IAmTheLionRider, and welcome back to Ocean State Zoo. Now, in the last episode, we kind of worked on 2 habitats, but in this episode, we're only going to be doing 1 habitat. So we are continuing where we left off last time, continuing to just kind of get my foundational species out the door. And I actually believe that this species in particular may have been the one that actually was able to make me be able to, join the economy in a sense, because I was able to start trading and get my auctions and stuff, and that's shortly when I started getting all of the stuff like the seal and bald eagle that we got last time. Similarly, I got my kangaroos from the auction, and Seth donated me those camels, so I got a bunch of stuff very quickly after I actually made this habitat. And yeah, I think it actually turned out really well. So I thought there would be no better habitat than to do the North American river otter habitat. Now you might be like, Nick, why the otters specifically? Well, it comes down to a fact that pretty much every zoo in New England has North American river otters. I don't know why, but it's true. Like, I think the only exceptions may be Southwick's and Franklin Park. Pretty much every other zoo, and even some places that aren't even really zoos, like Ecotarium, have North American river otters. So that's Capron, Buttonwood, Roger Williams, like I said, Ecotarium, Zoo in the Forest Park. Technically, I'm a little bit wrong about York. York has Asian small-clawed otters, but, very similar. Stone also has them, so it's gotten to the point where, like, Julie and I, we've literally made a definitive, like, North American river otter habitat tier list at this point, because we've seen so many just around here, and they're all quite similar in many ways. And so what you might see with this habitat in particular is I kind of tried to take inspiration from as many as I could and just kind of combine them to make something that is technically unique, but it has a lot of similarities to a lot of the other zoos that are around here, obviously. So I started out with a very basic foundation for a habitat, but I knew I wanted underwater viewing because who doesn't want to see otters underwater? It's just kind of a thing. And what you might see right now is I'm starting out with a thing that if you follow my Capron Park series, you'd be very familiar with. It is very similar to Capron Park Zoo's habitat, where they have basically these 2 wooden pillars and a wooden frame that kind of separates the underwater viewing into 3 little subsections. Now, other than that, and kind of the building a little bit too, I kind of took some inspiration from Capron for the building. The other things that I pulled from were obviously Roger Williams, kind of overall position-wise, like layout-wise, is very similar to this, where it's the pool with the underwater viewing, and then kind of along the back is just the land that they can run across and stuff. And you can kind of see it a little bit in the foliage choices I actually also chose for the habitat to kind of make it a bit more in line with the art style that I've kind of addressed already from using the North America pack scenery and stuff that I've been adding, like the pine needles and stuff, and just kind of making it all cohesive with the rest of the build as well as the other, New England zoos that I took inspiration from. But weirdly enough, so by taking inspiration from 5 different zoos around here, I managed to make an exhibit that actually looks unique but realistic to what would be very practical. And the other thing is, it's kind of the first zoo exhibit in this area that I've actually been able to kind of mess with elevation, even if it's just to a little level. So I basically added a little hill down for the underwater viewing so that it actually, works out pretty well. And I think it actually looks pretty good. So the other thing that I wanted to do is I knew I wanted a waterfall. Why a waterfall? Because 2 other zoos have them. So Stone and Buttonwood both have mini little waterfalls in their habitat, and I knew I wanted that to some extent. And so I actually said, instead of making my own custom one, why not just use the beaver dam enrichment item and just use that? Because I thought that would be smarter. It already looks really good, and you can't get some of those stones and stuff from any other thing outside of it. So basically, I just buried some of the enrichment item and then covered it up with some of the pine needles and gravel and stuff. And that is what the majority of the habitat kind of became. It's a very simple foundation. As you can see, it's very basic. It's just basically a circle with a pond in it. but I did a lot of detailing, even in the underwater section. So surprisingly, the underwater section actually had the probably most amount of detail put into the habitat. Just because I thought, well, if you're going to have underwater viewing and they're going to be a predominantly aquatic animal, you'd probably want underwater, areas to look nice. And I feel like a lot of people, specifically in like Planet Zoo and stuff, kind of take that for granted. Like they just go, oh yeah, it's underwater, so they just need some rocks. Or they'll sometimes put in like the hydrilla or like the eelgrass or something and just call it a day. And I wanted to do a little bit more than that. And now you might be wondering, what are you doing over here? So what is this backstage where you're putting like a pool in the back or whatever, and why does it look really, crappy? Well, the idea behind this was a kind of secondary holding / breeding like area. So as I mentioned in the last video talking about the bobcats, ZSU, I believe, has a thing where algorithmically the bot will identify if you have a secondary kind of breeding enclosure that's off exhibit, and it will give you kind of like a some kind of modifier to the normal 10% breeding rate algorithm to kind of increase your chances of having offspring if you build these like off exhibit areas. So that was like a big thing that I wanted to do. Was I wanted to, since I have a breeding pair of otters, I wanted to make sure that, I can get some babies out of it. So I made that little area, which you can kind of say is a quarantine area or a, secondary holding or whatever you want it to be. It's just a second area for the otters to go in, which I think is really good. So I guess now it is about time that we can kind of talk about some of the other things that I'm kind of doing, which are related to all the tips and tricks that I did to kind of get the, I guess, very unique design for the underwater viewing. So I used Kai's mod, as you saw right there, for the foundation of the area being gravel. So I actually used the path, the gravel path, and just kind of laid it at the bottom of the lake bed. And then over time, I just kind of built up with some custom foliage and rocks and stuff to get a kind of more organic riverbed, boreal forest, temperate forest kind of vibe, and I really like it. To some extent, it almost kind of looks more like a beaver enclosure than an otter enclosure, but I do think it works really well. And so, who knows, maybe one day if I get beavers, I'll move them here and maybe give the otters another enclosure. But you also might be wondering, okay, what is the actual, placement of stuff, right? Like why? So you may have noticed that I extended the seal building. So the inspiration for that was I kind of wanted all of my marine mammals to be in a central location. So instead of building the otters with their own separate building and stuff, and that would just end up cluttering stuff, I instead opted to just extend the seal building and make it kind of like a marine mammal building that the keepers can go in and take care of the seals, take care of the otters all at once. And I thought that was a really good idea. So I guess I should actually talk about the otters for a little bit. So I have chosen their names, and as I mentioned, a huge inspiration for the otters was they are they're New England animals through and through. And there's no more, New England thing, of course, than our shellfish, which, as we all know, otters love. And so I thought it would be appropriate to name them after two of our most popular shellfish in Rhode Island specifically. So their names are Mussel and Quahog, and I absolutely adore the names. I think they're really, really cute. And it's cute because they're otters and they eat shellfish. And I think, obviously everyone's going to say like, oh, Quahog, it's a Family Guy, but no, that is not a real place. For anyone who is not actually from Rhode Island, it is not an actual place. It is just the name of the clam. But, I think they're really cute. And speaking of names, we can kind of talk about the animals that I obtained last time, actually, that I mentioned in episode 3. My gray seal and bald eagle now have names, so I want to thank each and every one of you who submitted name suggestions in my comment section of my last video. I read through every single name suggestion you guys had. There were some interesting ones, I'm not gonna lie. You had one of them was Baldwin. That was a creative name. Even though I will say my bald eagle is a female, so that obviously kind of led to certain names being kind of higher priority on my likability chart than others. Similarly, there were some creative ones. I particularly liked the person that said that I should name the seal Bubba after the Roger Williams seal. That was also really cute, because I do love Bubba. That is very true. But ultimately, I gotta give it to Peter Leader and Turtle Derek, who came up with the two names that I ultimately ended up giving my animals. So I would like to formally introduce my new gray seal, Sailor. And Sailor, I get it. It's kind of like a pretty, you know, cliche name, because like, haha, it's a seal, you know, it's boats, that sort of thing. But I really like the name. It was kind of cute, and it's a very simple name that seems appropriate for what I'm going for. So I really liked Sailor. In my head canon, since we got him from the U.S. You know, Fish and Game, I like to think that he was a rescue, and like maybe like a sailor actually like found him or whatever. And I like that. I like the name idea. So Sailor is going to be the name of our gray seal. So I want to thank Peter for that one. And Turtle Derek is the one who ended up giving our eagle a name, and I did like a lot of eagle name suggestions, but ultimately the one that I really ended up liking particularly was Hera, because as you all know, my golden eagle I did end up naming Athena, and so it only seemed appropriate that I would name the bald eagle something similar, and that is where Hera came in. And so now we have a little Greek mythology goddess section for our eagles, and I think that's really, really nice. And so yeah, so those are all of the animals that, you know, came about in the last episode and this episode, and I think that ends up working out really nice. So as you can see right now, that's pretty much the otter like episode done, you know, give or take. Like the otter habitat is pretty much fundamentally done at this point. And so now I just ended up working on the interior of the now seal and otter habitat, which ultimately ended up being just me kind of blocking out the two sections. So before, as you just saw, it's just an empty shell with some seals in it. Now there are going to at least be some gates and stuff to separate the otters and their other secondary holding and stuff, as well as the gate for the seal. And I kind of took some inspiration from the, at Roger Williams, there's a area for the harbor seal feeding that is a very simple fence, and it really highlighted the fact that apparently harbor seals don't need very tall fences to, you know, make sure that they don't escape. They just need something about 2-3 feet high because they can't jump. So that was kind of nice. So I made a very low bar and made a very simple fence so that the seals could be fed, literally hand fed if they wanted fish, and you know, that seems to be the only thing that they really needed. Obviously seals spend a lot of their time either basking or hanging out in water anyway, so I didn't really think it was going to be that big of a deal if they didn't have too much interior space. But I placed down some of their enrichment items and a couple of food things, but ultimately it's nothing very complicated. Please forgive me if I don't really do that many backstage areas of like I'm not a big backstage person myself. I understand the appeal of them, but ultimately, like, I like making pretty habitats, and backstages just end up looking like really complicated, you know, gutter piece broomsticks and hangers and cabinets and stuff that I just don't have time for that. I'd just rather make other habitats, and especially in this series where I want to continue to expand the zoo, I don't want to get hung up on the little details like that for each and every animal. So I hope you all forgive me in that regard. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I'd like to introduce you to Quahog and Muscle. And, you know, fingers crossed, maybe we can get some babies kind of soon, because I would love baby otters in my habitat. And I hope that you guys would want them too. So thank you all for watching, and in next episode we are going to be actually kind of continuing the aquatic theme once again. Oh, you know, again, spoilers, think about what you have. Actually, if you check my how you can join ZSU video, you may have already kind of seen a teaser of one of my scrapped versions of that habitat, and you may get a very stronger idea of what the next episode is going to be. So thank you all for watching today's episode, and I will see you next time.